The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the Phil Hay Monday Club. It's brought to you by the Square Ball with The Athletic. Dan here from the Square Ball, Phil Hay from The Athletic. A quick reminder that for a limited time you can get 15% off the big three legal services with Levi's Solicitors, wills, probate and conveyancing. Head to levisolicitors.co.uk/Monday Club, or you can quote Monday Club when you contact Levi's. You get your regular 10% off legal fees on everything else. Levi's legal services for you personally and for your business. levisolicitors.co.uk/Monday Club. Hello, Phil Hay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoying
the flat tire this morning, Daniel. So even the car is joining in with the fun.
Great stuff. It's a great symbol for Leeds United season, that one, isn't it? Really. We have 15 minutes with Phil. That's how we like to do it here on the Monday Club. So I will start the timer in a second. Just a reminder, we need to cover off everything that did or didn't happen at Craven Cottage at the weekend. And also look ahead to Leicester, because that's going to be fun. 15 minutes on the clock. Here we go.
Let's go. There were two things happening at Fulham on Saturday. There was the team failing again, as they have in the previous two games against Liverpool and Crystal Palace. But I think the bigger tale was what was coming from the away end in the second half. And it's not as if we haven't seen over the past two seasons descent towards Radrizzani and to Victor Orta and the board at Leeds in general. But the fact that it's there again, and the fact that Leeds are back where they were this time last season, in fact, in a worse position in terms of points and the gap below them, I think underlines how long this has been going on for now. And the levels of dissatisfaction and dissent that are rising about the way in which the past two seasons have been handled. I did a turn for BT Sport before the game on Saturday, and they were asking, what is the problem? And I said, well, there are lots, but when you boil it down, it feels more than ever that Leeds are this club who like to think, like to have long-term ideas, like to have long-term vision, like to think long-term, but they simply haven't managed the short-term in the period since Marcelo Bielsa left, and even in the period, the immediate period before he was sacked. Last season has been every bit as difficult as this one. The post-Bielsa plans have clearly not worked. The attempt to make the squad more competitive this season and to push them up into that bracket Radrizzani was looking for, 10th to 14th, has not worked. Again, evidently, it's there to see. And I think that the mood of the away end, as far as I could tell, and I think this stretches further into the fan base, is that they do now want to see change, and they do want to see. They do want to see plans and vision for something different, and to break out of what has been a rut and a negative cycle now for quite a while. And I think if we're talking cycles, more than ever, you feel that this regime at the moment, as it stands, has really come to the end of theirs. It's really difficult to see where it goes from here.
We've said a few times, haven't we, you and I and Michael as well, on these various shows, that the away end is always an interesting litmus test for the general state of mind of the fan base at large.
Yeah, there are times when people can be, and I know this from going to football myself, there are times where you can be sucked into saying things you don't necessarily mean, or you don't necessarily feel deep down, because of the kind of immediate frustration of what's happening on the pitch there and then. But as I say, this isn't a kind of, again, I feel like the crowd have been really patient with Leeds this season in the way that they were patient with them last season. But patience does wear thin. And I think it was always going to wear thin after Palace and Liverpool, and the way in which the table had changed, and the way in which the atmosphere around the team at Leeds, and the form had kind of changed in the blink of an eye. Fulham was always going to be a bit of a lightning rod for frustration and concern, because Fulham is exactly the sort of game that you need to be taking something from. And you can wrap up the game itself fairly simply. Fulham were better. Fulham dominated. Meslier made two mistakes. Fulham took advantage of both of them. And even though there was the late goal that did make, the closing stages interesting, and a long stretch of injury time offered the chance of a draw, it was just papering over cracks, wasn't it? It was papering over cracks of a fairly limp and poor performance that, if we're being totally honest, didn't really deserve anything. And it turns this week into a monumentally important week. And, I think if Leeds pick this to have another bad one, at the end of it, it'll be very difficult to make an argument for them getting out of this.
Running out of road now, aren't they? Running out of road. Yeah, the chance just after the hour mark. We want water out. We want Orta out. Sack the board. Orta time to go. It seems to be getting directed towards Victor Orta, which points to recruitment.
Well, I don't think it's isolated to him, but clearly he's right in the thick of this, and recruitment is heavily his responsibility. And as I say, the squad didn't stand up to scrutiny last season. They got away with it more than anything and did survive. But in no way was it a season that was under control. And the same is true now as well. And, you cannot be absolved of blame if you're in senior positions like that. You go through a period really where the narrative for a long time focuses on the form of individual players and it focuses on team selection. And we can chat about Gracia, who is clearly not had a good time in these last three fixtures. But, team selection, tactics, everything else as we did with Marsh. But eventually, the fingers start to point to the top because it goes on for so long that you have to ask what's gone so badly wrong that it's come to this, that Leeds aren't able to be more competitive and haven't been able to build a squad that looks more capable of surviving. I mean, again, I wrote last week about Jorginho Ruta and, kind of limited impact that somebody so expensive has had on this season. And this is not an argument about whether Ruta is fundamentally a good player or talented player, because clearly he is. But if you're in the trouble Leeds are in, you can't have a situation where you need a result at Fulham. You're 2-1 down, and he just isn't involved. He's just on the bench again, as he has been right the way through. The squad just is, as much as there are talented players in it, and I do think there are. It comes back to the point we've been making several times, which is that it has not lent itself to building a strong team or a competitive team, and it's left them in really serious trouble. And I think at this stage, everybody has to face up to the fact that it hasn't worked for 2 years. Things do need to change, and I think if there is a takeover coming in the summer, and that is very much dependent on Leeds staying up in its present form anyway, if there is a takeover coming, the message from the away end I felt on Saturday was that people want to see that the next setup and the next regime is markedly different, that there are changes, that there are differences in approach to, particularly the building of the team and everything else. I think that was what you were hearing, was that people want to see that shift.
We also heard the name Marcelo Bielsa sung with 20 minutes to go. Obviously, I mean, you said in your match report it wasn't aimed at Gracia specifically. What do you think that meant then? Was it just a tribute to the great man? Was it a longing for something past, or what were we after there?
No, it wasn't. I don't think it was a tribute, and I don't mean because people don't want to, repeatedly pay tribute to him, because they do. I don't think the respect for his period as head coach will ever fade among the support. It seemed to me to be a pointed chant towards the board to say that was good. Those times were good. Those times, at the best, were phenomenal. This is not. And the decision to replace Bielsa, to go back to the sacking of Bielsa, I understood the decision because of the circumstances and the way the football was going. But the process of replacing him and recovering from that and building again is simply not taking effect. It hasn't. It's gone. It's gone wrong. And I think that was the point. You did that then, and since then, it's still been a kind of downward slope. It hasn't gone better. I don't think it was directed towards Gracia. I don't think it was a case of saying to Gracia, you're not him and you're not good enough. I think it was saying to the board, that was a period where we were happy. That was a period where, it wasn't going well latterly for Bielsa, but for a long stretch with Bielsa, that was the best it had been for as long as most people could remember. And now look at it. They still have games and they still have time to get out of this, Leeds. And tomorrow against Leicester is so big, you can't really categorise it properly. It's just a game they have to win, got to win. So it could happen still. But as it stands, and looking at the team on Saturday, it doesn't look like a team who are fighting their way out of this.
Fair to say, though, that there is frustration at Gracia's what's deemed to be negative approach towards some of these games as well, and the lack of front foot football. Because I wondered if maybe that's what part of the Bielsa chanting was about.
Well, it's. I guess people who are chanting can say for sure, and will know better. There's definitely been an aspect to that in the past three games, that what Gracia was doing well initially and what was working for him has gone and has just to bits in such a spectacular way. It's quite difficult to fathom. I mean, in a lot of ways, Willie Gnonto is kind of becoming his equivalent of Joe Gelhardt under Bielsa. You know, this player who people want to see used, who think can make a difference, the sort of player who you feel like in difficult times you should be leaning on because of his kind of wild card streak and his ability to do something out of nothing, but actually is getting fairly limited minutes. And okay, you know, Leeds pulled that goal back just before Gnonto came on. But at the point where he was starting to get ready at 2-0 down, it looked like the game had gone completely. And a little bit like what I was saying about Rutter coming on, you know, at 5-1 down to Palace and 3-1 down to Arsenal, 4-1 down to Liverpool. Almost appearing in circumstances where making a difference is asking too much or asking a lot and not making the best of it. And it's quite difficult to fathom. But again, to go back to, you know, the chat on BT Sport, you know, I was thinking, and I wrote this in my piece, but as the panel was Joe Cole and Steve Sibbel and Rio Ferdinand, and they were talking about how and why it had gone wrong. And I did look at Gracia and think he is just really picking up the pieces here. What you've had is, you know, a squad which was supposed to work for Bielsa, changing into a squad which was supposed to work for Marsh. Two guys who, whatever the kind of advertisement about Marsh was at the beginning, were very different in the way that they think about football, very, very different in the way that they play football. And now you've got Gracia, who again, I feel his football is very different to Marsh's, taking on a squad that wasn't built for him. So perhaps it was inevitable that however well it started for him, they were going to hit the wall again, or they were going to run into trouble, because the dots just don't really join.
Just over 4 minutes left, Phil. Two things to touch on specifically. I want to talk about the midfield, Rocker and McKennie, if we can, and then move on to Leicester quickly. So let's start with midfield. And what did you make of it on Saturday?
It's not working. It's too limp. There's not enough control there. McKennie, I don't think, you know, he had a good game against Forest, but I don't think has been particularly impressive at all since coming in from Juventus, and really begs the question of whether the money that's set aside to spend on him is a sensible investment at this stage. I also don't think that the position that he's playing in is the position where you're going to get the best out of him at all. And it was hard not to feel on Saturday that you would love to get Tyler Adams back in that midfield just to give it some more bite and to give it the presence of somebody who is supposed to be playing as a kind of deep line midfielder. Remind me of question 2 because I've forgotten.
Leicester City.
Well, they had a good win at the weekend, and they're clinging on like everybody else. I don't think it matters in any way how the game's played, or what the level of performance is like. The only thing that is going to count at the end of this is the result. But I genuinely feel like like the Forest game at home, Leeds are going to have to push the pace of this. They're going to have to set the tempo. They're going to have to engage the crowd. I think this is the last night where Gracia can afford to be seen to be on the back foot.
Barnes and Maddison as well, two thorns in our side. Both have been dealing with injuries recently. Any word on those? Because I think they're touch and go, aren't they, for this game?
Not at this stage. I would imagine Leicester will be having a press conference later today. Gracia also will be speaking later today as well. Makes a big difference to Leicester if they're involved, makes a big difference if they're not involved. And like you say, Barnes in particular, someone who has stuck it into Leeds previously.
What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like at Ellen Road tomorrow night? I've got a feeling it'll be broadly supportive from the off, but I feel like it won't take a lot to turn it.
I think that's absolutely right. Nobody is going to go in there wanting Leeds to lose. Nobody's going to want to go in there intending to turn on the team or the board or anyone else. But what sort of levels of patience are there going to be if it starts going wrong? This is where you have to serve it up, isn't it? It's where you have to serve it up. And I think, you know, there's a lot that's not working here. And, you know, in no way can you say that the players have acquitted themselves well in the past 3 games. And it does really, in the end, fall to them. It falls to Gracia as well. But as I say, with Gracia, it really does feel at the moment like picking up the pieces of a model which just is pretty much shot.
Any changes to the team that you would advocate for heading into this Tuesday game?
I would play Gnonto. I definitely would play Gnonto. It's the midfield. It makes you want to make changes there, but minus Tyler Adams, you really are reaching for somebody like JB or Archie Gray. Perhaps it's the moment, perhaps it's the time. I don't know. It can't afford to not work in the way that it didn't work at Fulham. But again, you know, it's not that there are no options there, and not that there's no way of changing it. He could put Adam Forshaw in. But one thing I think that will be quite interesting to learn today, if Gracia cuts to the chase with this, is whether Cooper's going to be fit, whether Verber's going to be fit. They both seem to take a bit of a hammering at points on Saturday. And, Cooper, to my mind, had a good game defensively. He swept up, a lot. He dealt with a lot. But I think, again, the fact that Leeds are in quite sort of resistant and desperate defensive mode tells you the story. They need to be controlling games as opposed to bailing water.
Yeah, they were better defensively, weren't they, on Saturday, it should be said.
But I think you can add to that Fulham didn't really look like they were ever out of third gear, did they? And I know Fulham have no pressure on them. They really don't. Their season is pretty much done. They're safe and it's all been in hand. But it was a little bit of a cruise for them, I felt.
Right, well, we've hit the timing just beautifully. 20 seconds left. Any final thoughts? It is just do or die time now, isn't it, really? We've been saying this for weeks. It's felt a little bit like Groundhog Day, Phil.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Win tomorrow, get something at Bournemouth, because May does not look straightforward at all.
Do we need 4 points out of these next 2 games, at least?
I would say so. Yeah, I think so.
And there's a hell of a point to finish on. There we go. Full-time whistle. One in the eye for the people who were criticising us for going about 30 seconds over last week, Phil.
I wish there was some, yeah.
I'm pleased we managed to hit the timing. That's probably one of the biggest victories we've had this week, I think. You can find us over on the Phil Hayes Show. We're going to be there towards the back end of the week, then after Leicester and before Bournemouth, your usual end of week dose over there. Theathletic.com/Leeds pod if you want to read Phil's stuff, interact with him as well. What do you think you're going to get out of Javi today then, just as we sign off? Not a lot?
I don't think a huge amount. I don't think he'll deviate from what he's been saying. We're chatting to him after the game on Saturday, asking him about what had gone on, and he was, again, didn't look like he necessarily had the answers there and then, was saying that in his view, he thought quite a lot of the players were playing well, which I don't think is necessarily true over the past few games. Pressed on Nonto and also Melee in goal, whether or not Robles should come in there, and really went down that line of, look, I'm head coach, decisions are mine. I look at the players, I'll do what I think is best. So, I think he'll be wary of saying too much today. I think he'll keep everything pretty close, and he'll know that everything over the next 48 hours is going to be judged on what happens against Leicester.
Phil, thank you. I think we cheated there and went slightly into extra time.
Yeah, we did. That's the way to do it. Yeah, placate everybody.
Yeah, hopefully nobody noticed. Enjoy your trip up to Thorpe Arch, and we will catch up towards the back end of the week on the Phil Hayes Show.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.